Hey guys, welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are taking a look at Medal of Honor that was actually published by Electronic Arts and developed by DreamWorks Interactive back in 1999. It was released in and around late 99 in both North America and Europe. And essentially this is the first of the franchise, and it's a first person shooter that is pretty much held within the realm of World War Two, kind of retelling the story, kind of more so like kind of like from a movie style perspective. So the development of the game actually began way back in 1997, and well-known filmmaker Steven Spielberg actually played a part in having the game actually come to life, as he had approached DreamWorks Interactive and outlined an idea for a video game. So they actually got to work on it. So the game went into development for over 2 years, and when it was actually about to be released, there was a few kind of drawbacks in terms of what certain elements that were in the game. Essentially, there was a lot of elements that were actually removed from the final version of the game. There was actually supposed to be a lot more like violent kind of elements in terms of like blood and like gruesome style deaths and so forth, but they'd removed it due to different reasons that were currently going on at the time. Plus, there was a lot of kind of like backlash to certain things that were going on, because a lot of people didn't want the game to be really made like around World War Two, because they think that it was just going against everything that had happened in years gone by. So they eventually found and came to an agreement to release the game, and the game was actually released to critical acclaim. The game is also considered to be one of the original and best first person shooters to ever be released on the PlayStation system itself. It's quite interesting to look at the stats like for when this game was released. Like, it got rave reviews across the board in all games magazines, because there was nothing really like it at the time. Like, yes, there was a lot of really good and very influential first person shooters on the platform, but this game really definitely took everything to the next level, to a point that in one of the final issues of the official UK PlayStation magazine that was ever released, the game itself was actually chosen to be the 8th greatest game of all time on the actual console. Even IGN themselves ranked the game as number 21 of their top 25 games of all time on the original PlayStation console. So that speaks volumes for the how good this game actually is. And even from my own personal experience, I remember when I first actually played the game, I will admit I was totally blown away by it, because again, like I said, I had played a lot of really good first person shooters. There was likes of Duke Nukem, there was Doom, there was Disruptor, and there was even likes of Exhumed, all fantastic games. But again, they were all kind of like fictional based. This was the first kind of proper game that was actually based on like true life kind of events, but again they had a different kind of like more of a movie style vibe to it. But in saying like regarding to a movie style vibe, it was actually one of the very first few games that I'd ever played that actually did have that movie style quality tied to it. You just felt like that you were interacting or actually part of a movie. Even down to the soundtrack, everything was composed by big name music artists and composers at the time. They really went to town on the budget with developing this game, and it shows because the quality of the game was actually phenomenal by the time it was actually released, and it shows how good the game actually is. It really is an incredible title. So when you're playing through the game, like obviously you play like as a soldier that's tasked with infiltrating certain kind of elements throughout the game, both like using stealth and even like sort of kind of like disguises and stuff. It was kind of unheard of at the time, because most games usually you go through every level and all you do is literally just run and gun. There is those elements in this game, but then there's other elements where there's levels where you don't really shoot anything, or you really have to try and avoid engagement if at all possible, and you walk around the levels pretending to be somebody else to try and not arouse suspicion to your whereabouts or who you actually are as a person. So that was actually really cool. That was a really cool interactive kind of thing as well, and it kind of tied in with that whole movie element. It was one of the main games that really told a story as you were playing through it. That's what was really good about this game. And like I said, the gameplay style, even like so like the first person effects, and the game was all in 3D as well. There was very few games at that time, or FPS games at that time, that were actually in full 3D on the PlayStation. There was plenty of levels in the game. They all range from different areas. You'd be going through different countries, different types of terrain. The game was tough, don't get me wrong. It definitely had its challenges. Like, I remember when I first played it, it took a while to get used to the controls. Even going back to actually playing it now, it actually, I'd be surprised I surprised myself how I was able to actually even play it back then, because I think we're kind of spoiled for choice with the likes of modern games, with the likes of the free flowing controls, with using the analog sticks and stuff like that. We didn't have that luxury back then, so we had to work with what we had. Now we still managed to make it work, but going back to play these old games, they are very fiddly, but that's not to say that they're not good. These games are still excellent, even by today's standards, and this definitely is one of the best FPS games pretty much of all time, in my opinion. Like, and definitely on the PlayStation, I absolutely love this game. Again, it will challenge you, because the enemies, it would drive you crazy at times. If you make a mistake or anything at all, you will be crucified for it. And if you're going through the game trying to, like, when you're using combat abilities, or if you're like throwing like grenades and stuff like that, the enemies are that clever that they keep kicking the grenades back to you, and it's very, very hard to actually take out enemies like with actual grenades. You nearly 9 times out of 10 just have to take your gun out and literally just shoot them in the face, because it's the only way to get rid of them. But the game actually, even though it tells a great story, but it's so much fun to play as well, and like there's so much interactive elements with it. The fact is, like here with this level as it's shown here, you're not really kind of engaging with combat as such. You're trying to do one task so that you can move into another area. You could go in all guns blazing, but the issue you have with that is you raise the alarm and then you just get bombarded with enemies, and once they're alerted to your presence, the enemies just keep coming. There just seems to be no end of them, and you'll be dead before long. So you're better just to go through the level as it's intended for you to play, to get the most out of it. But at least it has those interactive elements, and the one thing I did really enjoy about this game is the fact is that it does change up the play styles as you're going through it. Like, you have run and gun scenes, and then you have the likes of this here where it's more slow pace, where you have to be more aware of your surroundings and who you're engaging with and who you should avoid in order to keep moving, so that you can take and find items that you need, so that you can access other areas. So it's definitely a really cool element to it, which you didn't really see too many or too much of that in games at that time. So it's definitely a unique concept, and that was only kind of furthered on by other games later on in the series, and even with most FPS games moving forward. That's the funny thing is, because when this game actually did first come out, it actually changed a lot of kind of different styles, because most FPS games were really just known for just run and gun kind of gameplay and not really much else to it. This was one of the very first few games, like I mentioned, that actually had those elements where it changed the gameplay styles and interactivity elements, but not only that, actually presented a really good story on top of that as well, which you genuinely did not see with many of these games. And in a lot of ways, it actually set the benchmark for games, for future games, not just on the likes of the PlayStation with FPS titles, but you've seen a lot of FPS games on the likes of PC and even later consoles, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, even up to modern consoles, where FPS games are a huge staple now, and a lot of them all tell really good stories. They've all got their own unique kind of quirks. So it is really interesting to see where all these kind of elements actually came from, and they actually all came from games like these. Because again, like this game, like I said, was one of the first kind of FPS games to really have a tie-in with some like kind of like a movie kind of style franchise. It did feel like you were playing an interactive movie back in the day when you were playing this, because again, just the sound effects, the level design, the music, the background music, it was very, very reminiscent and reflective of like old like war movies of that kind of time period. If you were growing up in the 90s, I remember like watching loads of them, and it just felt like you were actually in one of those movies. That's what was so cool about it. But then like the developer DreamWorks were known for kind of making interactive movies, as you may know as well, and they're really good at that sort of thing. So when they put it to video games, you could see that it worked really well, which was unusual, because we all know that most movie tie-ins, even though this isn't actually based on an actual movie, but it is actually based on events similar to like those kind of eras and stuff. But you don't often see movie type games actually do really well, but this was actually one of those games that actually did, and it was one of the best selling FPS games of all time on the PlayStation, and is still considered to be one of the best FPS games ever. So I'd love to know your thoughts on Medal of Honor, and did you play it back in the day, and what did you actually think of it? Did you enjoy it as much as I did? Be sure to share your thoughts and comments down below. So if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be updated whenever I release future content, and also make sure to share the video, as I am going to be re-exploring a lot more of these fantastic old school classic FPS games and movie style games, and sharing my thoughts and experiences with everyone. Also, I will be putting together another video with this game, doing an actual full playthrough of the campaign so that you can see it for yourself, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. So as always, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.